5 o'clock and call our study session into order. Will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Blevins?
Here.
Commissioner Norwood?
Here.
Commissioner Siragusa?
Here.
Commissioner Roberts?
Here.
Commissioner Stallings?
Here.
Commissioner Orr?
Here.
And Mayor Mason.
Here. Item number 2, at the Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the regular session agenda.
On 6.1, it says that we are willing to make this offer for up to $5 million for 400 acres.
No,
Is that,
that's, we sat in a session and discussed
yeah,
that.
well, why is that on the agenda itself if it says we're willing to spend up to $5 million?
That may be my fault. We may not have clarified that. We're not spending $5 million to buy 400 acres. I would clarify that now. Could you go ahead and bring that up, Kent, so we can just read that language and answer all those questions? I noticed there was I will say, a typo in the time frame of the infrastructure on that. It's December of 26, not 24. But let's just take a look, because that is a good point.
It says approximately 400 acres. I think 400 acres is the least amount we're thinking about. But there's more acres that we're also thinking about besides the 400.
Can you pull up the background?
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, the A, whatever that is, A1 dash.
I mean, mainly, I just don't want the seller to think maybe we can get more, you know?
No, the seller doesn't, I'm confident the seller doesn't think that. I will tell you that any agreement for the land will come back before this commission, and you will have the opportunity, you will have to approve it.
Okay.
All this will do tonight, and I don't think Alan's going to be here until 6:30, or Nate. They can certainly talk about the amounts, and you guys, the amounts, you guys are the governing body, so you can approve if you want to change the amount or something. But as discussed before, this is an effort to move ahead, solves a lot of the issue. I just got back from an ERDA meeting, and one of the things that was talked about is from the hospital was how they need industry, because they need good paying jobs with medical plans that will come in there and pay them more than Medicaid and Medicare. And that's what we're hearing from our own. So there's a lot of reasons to have industry. I get the concern is, I can assure you, we are not going to pay $5 million for 400 acres, and you guys will have the final say on that.
Sure. No, I had received an email that was very concerned about that price tag, so.
I wouldn't believe everything I read in the
Sure.
newspaper. Sure.
And I had the same concerns over that 400 plus acres and 5 million. If it's gonna come in front of us again, I'm okay with it. But I wanna make sure we're not overpaying for any land. We can't do that. And I don't know why we have the emergency on the agenda later either. I feel like we're getting in a hurry here as far as spending this money. And we have nothing in writing yet. And what's the plan? When we buy this land and improve it, I know we've got the $15,800 in grants from ERDA to improve it, but what's the plan when somebody comes in? Are we gonna lease it to them? Are we gonna sell it to them? Are we gonna, does anybody know what the plan is yet? Do we have any idea what that might be yet?
We
I
know
don't think the city needs to be in any more real estate. We talked about this last couple of years, and we don't need to own any more land. I don't like that idea. It's not what we should be doing as city government.
May I chime in on this? Sure. From my understanding, according to Charlene Flannery, the information that we've gotten from her, there's a possibility of us receiving $16 million. And in that, I believe it's coming in the form of a grant. So in that, we have a certain period of time in which we're allowed to be able to spend those monies. So we need to make the deal, and we need to, we need industry to be able to not only help the citizens here in Enid, but it will also help our Department of Defense, which is Vance Air Force Base, because money exchanges. And if we can develop the blighted areas, the areas that have not been constructed, we can create economic revenue for the city of Enid. And we all know that we operate off of sales tax revenue dollars. And by bringing industry into Enid, we create opportunity for citizens here in Enid, not just for 2, 3, 4 years, but for generations. So land is not going to get any cheaper. The cost of land is going to continue to rise. So with these type of federal fundings and grants coming into Enid and giving us the opportunity to be able to purchase land, we need to do it. And also, one more thing, the infrastructure. We don't have to have a particular, a certain business say, well, we're going to be there, or we're going to guarantee us that they're coming in. The thing is, if we have the infrastructure in place, I'm just looking at it from a business point and constructural point. If we have the infrastructure in place, we're already ahead of the game. We don't have to wait, because the biggest resource we can ever obtain is water. You know, I mean, we're spending what, $300+ million on a water infrastructure project, Call Lake project. We can use that water, and guess what? We have industry coming into Enid. We can also sell that water to the industrial park. So I believe, as a council and as city government, we need to not be reactive. We need to become proactive here in Enid. That's my opinion, Commissioner.
I agree with you, but what I don't agree with is it puts the city at a certain amount of risk for that $5 million. There's no guarantee somebody's going to come out there right away. And so we just need to minimize our risk. And I don't think the way this is written right now, and we've got an emergency, what we're trying to do is spend money just to get more money. And that's fine, I understand that, spending $5 million to try and get this $15.8 million to do the infrastructure improvement, but there's no guarantees anybody's gonna come out there. And then, if somebody does, are they gonna lease the land? Are we gonna continue to own it? I don't wanna continue to own it. And then after that, are we gonna sell it to them, which would be ideal? We don't want our hands in that anymore. We've tried that before as a city, and it doesn't work out very well.
Well, yes, I guess what I would say and the Commissioner's right. I mean, there's a couple ways you could do economic development. You can hope they'll show up, hope they'll buy a piece of land and put their whatever here and hire a bunch of people. But everybody tells you, the professionals tell you, that unless you have a piece of land that's ready or semi-ready, said you're behind the power curve.
Right.
And a lot of people won't even consider us if we don't have land. Now, the $5 million, we're not fixing to pay $5 million for that piece of land. I think we all know that. We've talked at some length about what the land's worth, but in doing the financial deal, as we talked about, is not putting us at any economic stress on us for $5 million if we have to go ahead and borrow it, or go ahead and borrow it. But I think buying the land does make sense, and having, even though we don't have somebody standing out there in the wings saying, yeah, I want it. That concept of having land ready for an economic development is a sound idea, in my opinion.
The emergency. Okay. These bond guys and financial advisors, they put emergencies on everything, but I believe that is because of the work that they do. So if we don't approve it with an emergency, then the resolution doesn't go into effect. Now, most resolutions are not that time sensitive, but it won't go into effect for 30 days. And I think the thought is that our financial advisor has been working to find out how we would, what the terms of this, this proposal for getting the $5 million. So he doesn't want to wait 30 days because there may be a shift in interest rates and stuff. So they've put in and that is so that he can do whatever he does. I don't know what you do in order to get banks to tell us, but he's going to be asking numerous banks, what are your terms? And he doesn't want to wait for 30 days to ask that, particularly since if all this works, we need the infrastructure to be completed by December 2026. So that's that's why.
So we have 2.5 years. Now, what's the December deadline? Is that the
So-
deadline to get the
Was
50?
that December 24 or 26?
It's 26.
26
Okay.
of December.
And it's to get
Has to be
the
complete.
infrastructure done, the 15,800,000 infrastructure, roads, sewers, water. That's my understanding.
So, Commissioner, I would say a couple things. As far as, is our plan to lease or to sell? I'd say yes. I think we'd look at that deal once it come down the pipeline to see what worked best for us. I will tell you that if you go look at Purcell and see whether or not they sat around and waited until Google showed up and said, yeah, we'll wait several years before they were ready to go that day. If you go over to Perry, you've got the same thing going on over there. It was two communities, small communities, much, much smaller than us, that were willing to see a vision of moving forward. Now, we've got $16 million sitting out there that we can choose not to do this deal, and then that business come along, and then we're gonna have the money for the property, hope they hang around while we develop it, and then we're gonna come back up here and try to get you to spend $16 million on infrastructure
I
that we
understand.
could have totally
I
had.
understand all of that. What I'm
And the
saying is
$5
I
million-
don't understand the hurry with the emergency.
It's to lock in rate.
Okay.
It's to lock in rate.
And
is what
hopefully
it
we'll have
is.
a chance, hopefully there'll be an option to refinance if the rates go down?
It was my understanding that there was no early payoff on that.
I don't recall, but the financial advisor will be here.
Okay.
And there'll be potentially two separate votes, one to pass it, one to pass the emergency, which requires, is it five?
Five
Five.
for resolutions.
And I'll also remind everybody that we just appropriated 2 weeks ago, $800,000 for our ERDA to go out and find us businesses. And part of our obligation to that is be prepared when they bring that back. And we all sat in that room and we looked at that commerce study that no one wanted 60-acre sites anymore. That if you're not prepared to come with some big areas, they're gonna go on down the road. And they will. Wichita's that way, Oklahoma City and Edmond's that way. So we can either try to get prepared, and you're right, we don't have anybody lined up right now, but it's not putting us in a bind either. So I think you have to spend money if you want to make money. And at the end of the day, like Gerald was talking about, we just sat through that meeting with the ERDA and heard from one of the hospitals. It's to their benefit also. We know that both of our hospitals struggle, but it's to their benefit also if the jobs we bring in actually have jobs that pay company insurance. It's a huge deal, whether you're doing that or whether you're bringing in jobs that are $10 an hour and then they show up and they don't pay their bill at the hospital. So, but we all looked at this thing,
And the reason I asked about December 2024 is because that's what this agenda item has on it. Moreover, the infrastructure projects must be completed by December of 2024. Misprint?
Misprint, I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. It's
a
December
mistake,
2026.
Commissioner. We frequently, I don't know if it's frequently, we make mistakes sometimes. I apologize for that. It is December of '26. I don't know how the '24 got in there. The great thing is you guys get to make the decision. I agree that it's risky. I'm with you on that. But I think it's a risk worthwhile when you look at trying to move the city ahead. From my opinion, I don't vote. I just follow your direction, so.
I'll just add, I've heard the complaints about, giving TIFs to businesses that came in. Okay, what I got out of that TIF was $500,000 for a new fire truck. I got widening of the roads leading up to that building. They're putting a $26 million building on the property that they purchased. using local contractors, which is influencing money back into our pockets. And plus, when they turn around and they do the tax on the property, it's going to go through the roof with a $26 million building. They're getting their money back through the taxes on that. Plus, we also got another mile of roadway done from that TIF. And there was complaints about, well, why are we giving TIFs? Why are we giving TIFs? Because we're the only ones that charge state tax on inventory. Kansas doesn't, Texas doesn't, Louisiana doesn't. So we can lose out on a business that's gonna have $8 million yearly payroll because, oh, TIFs aren't good. No, TIFs are great. And this is sort of like a TIF deal that if we can turn around, we can have it and we can bring something in, it's gonna bring more money in the future. And $16 million is a
I agree
lot
with
of
you.
money for
I agree.
infrastructure.
I agree. And we can sit here and speculate all night, but we're not. I just hope we're careful with it, and I hope it works out.
Okay. One other thing I'll mention is we're in the water business now. We're about to really be in the water business coming up. I mean, we've invested $342 million in this. So we need to sell water. We need to go find those businesses that want to buy a lot of water. So,
Good news is hydrogen plant that is seeking to come here and is looking for property to purchase and everything else, they use a lot of water.
We'll see.
A lot of water for hydrogen.
okay. Any other comments, discussion?
Are we aiming for a company that uses a lot of water, or are we gonna bring in the first company that wants to lease the land or buy the land? I mean, are we, to sell water, if we wanna sell a large amount of water, are we looking for companies that sell water?
Yes,
Or we-
Charlene Flannery is beginning to put marketing materials together. She will be here later tonight. We can bring her in to explain her approach. She's been on the job about 4 months. I think that she's bringing a fresh approach, and so I've heard her talk about marketing. She needs something to market. It's very hard to sell property you don't have, and I get it. I'm with you. It's risky. I've had to do some thinking about this myself, but one of the things that we did talk about, maybe not enough, and this is, again, is not something that's a certainty, but we have talked about, you mentioned your desire not to hold land. That there might be an option with another entity like GCIA or some other entity, if the commission wanted to do that, to move the land over based on that entity issuing bonds to pay for it. Now, that's just, I'm thinking out loud, which can probably get me in trouble, but I'm just trying to tell you there are options. But no, we don't have a defined deal. This is kind of a leap of faith. But I think that this is a deal that could be a defining moment too for the city and the commission, and only time will tell.
So we're still in the initial stages of figuring out who we want to target as far as industry.
Yeah, I could, Charlene probably could tell you what she thinks. I think we're looking for big employers that need a lot of land, use water. But if somebody that comes in here, I don't know how much water Amazon uses, if they were to come in here, and I'm just throwing names out, I have no idea who's going to come, but there are RFPs that come from the State Department of Commerce. Charlene could talk about this more, so I think I'll ask her to come next time and explain that process. She gets those, and many of those she can't respond to because of what they're asking for we don't have.
We don't have that.
It just seems to me there's a lot of unanswered questions on this so far, and maybe we need to narrow it down. We need to figure out who are we after? What are we going to do with that land? Are we going to lease it? Do we want to sell it? What kind of industry are we after? There's a lot of variables that are unanswered, and we're going into this with our eyes half closed, and I just hope the plan is better before we spend the money. Thank you.
All right, if there's no other discussion, I'll move on to item number 3.
Actually, yes, I can bring up 6.2 real quick.
Okay.
Consider approval of an ordinance amending the Enid Municipal Code Administration. Guys, I went through this word for word, and this is, and it even says the subject for this ordinance edition is providing guidelines. That's not really the definition of an ordinance. An ordinance is a law or something you need to follow. This is just guidance for boards and commissions. It really doesn't, it's got a lot of
Can you pull up
fluff in
the
it.
actual ordinance that we're
It's
talking
got a
about?
lot of fluff in it, and it really doesn't say anything.
Do you think it needs to be more restrictive? Is that what?
No, I don't, there's nothing in here. I mean, what, so, I mean, we can go through it line by line. I mean, I'll start with purpose, that's fine. To promote sound, stable decision-making and productive meetings. Well, this ordinance isn't going to help with that. There's nothing in here that's gonna help with that. All this ordinance is telling people is members of appointed boards do not direct city employees. The hiring, firing is for the city manager. They're subject to the Open Meetings and Open Records Act. Board members should review agendas prior to the meeting. All board decisions must be made at a public meeting. And the big one I can't figure out is Section D, conflict of interest. Is it a law? Is it a law that if you abstain from a vote, that it's automatically a no vote? Is that a law?
Yep.
For this board, it is.
For what board?
For you all. If you abstain from a vote, it is a no vote.
Okay.
If you are not here, it is just,
It's
you're
a-
not here.
It's an automatic no vote.
If you abstain.
Okay, I did not know that.
And,
For our board.
and the interesting thing is, it depends on what the motion is. So, for example, if you could have a motion not to approve something, and the abstention would be a yes vote. And then this is an old state law, and so I think what they probably thought was an abstention is a no vote on approving the item. But that's not how government works. You guys make a motion, I don't want to approve that. And then the no vote is yes. Or if it's, let's approve this award, then the no vote, the abstention is a no vote. Okay. So, after talking with members of the public, I added in the option of just leaving the meeting so that it doesn't matter what the vote, what the motion is. A motion to approve, a motion not to approve. I don't think the conflict of interest comes up very much on boards other than this board and maybe the MAPC board. But it could. I suppose it could come up on the PACE board if a relative was doing a mural. So I've given the full amount. Now, we don't have to say that an abstention is a no vote, but we've always said that to our boards. But it is only an abstention is a no vote on whatever the motion is for you all. That's in Title 11, and it talks about the governing body. So it would be, so we've just had that be the rule for all the boards. And this is just, as you said, suggestions. How to, it is like the best practices manual. It came out of discussions with the OMAG people about why not give boards and commissions an idea of what the best way to handle things are. That's all this is.
Well, it's really not an ordinance. An ordinance is a law. Am I incorrect?
Well, an ordinance is how we set rules and regulations and things like that, and we have plenty of ordinance. There is no penalty to this. I mean, it isn't, but not all of our ordinances have penalties.
Okay, sure, I understand that.
Okay.
But when you look at the things that are in here, it's fluff. It's just fluff. It really doesn't say anything. We're not really telling people how to run things. It just, all it says is, I mean, like I said, I can go back and repeat them for you, Carol. I mean,
Okay.
it's fluff.
It's
That's
just,
all this is. I don't even know why we spent time on it.
I was asked to.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other comments, Commissioner? Anybody? Okay. Now, item 3.1, quarterly VDA update from Mr. Cooper.
Evening, Mayor, City Council, City Manager, City Attorney, everyone. Good to see you again. It's always great to be in Enid. I had the pleasure this morning to start off the day with having a briefing with our new wing commander, Colonel Throckmorton. So that was a pleasure for number one, so he could understand how and why we're organized like we are to impact things at the local, state, and federal level. So we always get the next great wing commander, so it was good to kind of meet him and kind of hear a lot about what's going on in his world and for him to understand what we're working on and why. So, and to make sure that he understands that we don't really work on anything unless it helps him increase mission capability, reduce costs, all good things for Vance. And the way we work on it, infrastructure, quality of life, and then anything else that would impact his ability to increase his mission. So that's what we're doing. We continue to do. So we updated all the issues that are new and old that we're working on. So it was a good meeting. Out of that, I know we talked a little bit about there is another entity that would like to make a proposal on an alternative energy process for them out at Vance. As you know, the Department of Defense like to get all bases off the grid and has some kind of alternative energy option. So we'll try to set up some meetings to do that. We also, as you all know and kind of heard in the past, there are some folks that are wanting to develop some property near the base. So we'll have some follow-up meetings on that to make sure we kind of have the right look about, understanding what their needs are not as far as housing, whether it's married or single units or apartments or that sort of thing. Knowing that the military doesn't direct anybody, they can't guarantee people should, acquire these places, but it's property that's near to the base, and so it would make sense if you do develop it properly, then certainly it's going to be utilized by the folks that are closest to it. So we'll have some meetings with that. Your staff previous has had some discussions about it, but it'll be time for you to kind of hear and see what those plans are. So we'll move forward on that. So on DSIP first, as you all know, your next DSIP proposal ended up being a $15 million water assistance program. I think it's to develop the Ames water pipelines and things like that. So I've had some meetings in the last 3 weeks with Secretary Moriarty, who's the Air Force Installation Secretary, followed up again with Patrick O'Brien, Jay, and everybody else at OLDCC, so they're all aware that, you certainly, I know Steve and Scott, I know you've helped a lot with this too. So we have all the I's dotted, T's crossed, so we're good to go on that. So now it's a matter, they'll probably have right at 168, 170 grants out there that they'll be weeding through. And again, Secretary Moriarty, the reason to talk to him, he will be the one that will get the grants for the Air Force and then make the recommendation to the SecDef for ones that they want to move forward. Unless we've heard anything else, the last that I heard from Patrick, that probably October about the time frame that we would get a letter of request to present for a grant. Essentially means that you're going to probably get the grant unless you can't meet some kind of commitment and the criteria developed. So you'll probably hear something, sometime early October. So we hope for the best on that, but I think we have a good proposal on one of the resiliency grants to be awarded. So the next thing, Eisenhower School, as you all know, back when we went to DC, they have a new program. It's for construction and expansion of public schools on military bases, something that Inhofe put in the NDAA about 15 years ago, found out what the need was to replace all the schools on base, and then they started funding it. The first ones to be done was Fort Sill and Fort Riley is in Kansas. Those were the two. They started worst to first. We're now up about 69th or so in line to have that done. Our superintendent, the plans they put forward initially, and we presented when we went to DC to OLDC that it was 6 classrooms, probably somewhere in the range of 5 to 6 million. It is an 80-20 split, so the Department of Defense is going to fund 80% of whatever it is you do. But, so we made that proposal, but then I get a call from Patrick O'Brien saying, well, really, the Department of Defense, the way this has really worked is that they want new schools. So the 20% match on a new school versus just the 6 classroom is quite different, as opposed to, you're talking about $1 million versus, $5 to $8 million, depending on how that new construction for the new school, because the new school is going to be somewhere 25 to 30 million. We are on a 90-day clock to try to figure that out. Gerald knows I've had conversations with the Department of Commerce, so there are possibly some situations. I don't know if you've had talked to Jeremy since then, but I know that is an option. Plus, I'm working with the congressional delegation for further looks. There'll be more to come on that because we got to figure something out between now and then. But it is kind of, if you're us, I mean, we really want a new school because all of us in this room will never have to worry about it again. Plus, we'll have excellent. They have the school is not big enough today for all the military people to go there because the classroom we only have 6 and 1 classroom for each grade. So we'll pressure ourselves to figure out ways to find money to do that. I've spoken with the new superintendent as well. He knows they've also got to pressure themselves. Of course, they're kind of limited on bond issues to date because they've had some in the past, as we all know. So anyway, but
Mike, can I ask just a quick question? Isn't the schools also part of how they score Vance?
Yes, sir, they are. If you look, military value is always going to be the top criteria. So there's like 5 issues on military value. But the tiebreakers are always going to be quality of life because, again, we don't have any bad bases anymore. It's not like it was in 91 or 93, as Rob knows. We could have probably picked out a base that was bad, but now you don't. So things like this. And so if we sit here and don't have a good facility, but someone else does, then we kind of look, we're kind of out of sync with what really needs to be done. And that's something I spoke with Colonel this morning to make sure, naturally, if we have the opportunity with 80% money to fix it right now, make it high-tech, make it do all the things that you want it to do, and have a new facility, that makes sense for us to, and it's going to be hard. I'm not telling you it's not, but we'll figure out a way to get this done. So superintendent is aware of that too, so
So is enrollment at Eisenhower, is that only for Vance Air Force Base families?
No.
Okay. What's the percentage of, just families from Enid, non-military, off base?
I don't.
Send their kids there?
I don't know that I know the percentage.
Okay. If we're responsible for 20%, if I'm understanding you correctly, we're responsible for 20% of a new cost of a school. So would the city be able to, the composition of the students, will 20% be then from the city and the remaining 80%
I will
from
tell you,
Vance
I'll find this
families?
out, Commissioner, but I think there are more Enid students in there versus,
Vance?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. Now, that school was not always on base, but once we acquired the property, they were able, since 9/11, do the new security gates and all that. It is on the base,
Yeah.
and it's our school. It's Enid Public School, so they don't own it.
Okay.
We do, so, but, and we did have a bond issue prior to the 2005 BRAC because we had everybody in a 30-year-old portable. We had no classrooms inside a building. They were all outside. So that's how those grades 1 through 6 classrooms got built, right prior to 2005. So anyway, this is a way to get it done, leverage federal dollars to get it done, as opposed to, us having to eventually spend the full amount to get it replaced or repaired or brought up to speed. So it's a pretty good program, but anyway, so our split would probably be anywhere, depending on the size of, and they're working on the engineering design now, so we don't know exactly what the cost is now, but it's probably going to be, our share would probably be, the public school share would be about 5 to 8 million, I would suspect. So anyway, so there'll be more to come on that. The other thing in the NDAA, and I'll talk about our Milcon project in a minute, but it also in the NDAA this time, the DSIP, Defense Community Infrastructure Program, initially was a 10-year program up to $100 million per year. There's language now in both House and Senate to make that a permanent entity. So for communities and states, that's huge, to have $100 million to leverage to be able to get community and state dollars to do things the Defense Department can't otherwise do themselves. So it's a great way to leverage state and community dollars. So I think you'll see that pass because there's overwhelming support on both sides, so that'll happen. The other thing is, we talked about the squad ops facility that's a need out there. Lucas put it in approps and in the NDAA on his side. It didn't make it. Mullen also put engineering design monies, $8.4 million, in the Senate. So it's in the NDAA, it was approved, and it's also in approps approved. Generally, the way this happens, I know Rob knows this, but for the years that we've been getting Milcon earmark projects, it's almost every year has happened. You either got it in the House or Senate side, and then once it goes to conference, generally, unless there's a major budget hit or whatever, they usually reconcile that. And if it's a needed program, and if the House member thinks that it's also needed, which Frank asked for it just didn't get approved, then most of the time you get that. Now, it's not a given, but we won't know that until later in the year. So October, November, I think, will be the timing that they'll do conference and reconcile the defense budget. So I feel pretty good at the moment. I know thanks to Mullen, we were able to get that in there, and Tom Cole and all, on the probe side will support it naturally if it can get in there. So we'll continue to follow that, but that's good news. So the other thing that I wanted to mention, because I've had a couple of calls about some of the issues that are going through your planning commission to get approved. I know the mayor and I had some discussions with folks, and it was dealing with approval of say, solar farms, but it could be wind or any tower structure. What I would suggest, and we've told mentioned this to the folks, that there's a way for us to get approval, much like we do with wind turbines, that we can get a no adverse impact letter. I mentioned that to the commander this morning, that if we have some, say a solar farm that's developed, if we have a no adverse impact letter from them, it does not impact them. We have great relationships with the Defense Department Clearinghouse. These are the experts that deal with any aerospace issue anywhere, whether it's close to our community or away from. But if we get those two answers as those are brought before the commission, that really should be the answer. There's been a lot of discussion about a particular solar farm, and we want the right answers. Nobody doesn't, but once you're given approval, and solar has changed a little bit, just so you understand the glint and glare issue, and just so you know, a lot of airports are developing solar farms around, right on the facility. They're displacing the grass and putting solar in there. Davis-Monthan, where Southern Command is at, there's a solar right next to the runway, a solar farm right next to the runway. So there are other, Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, same way. They have, these solar farms are developed right next to their facilities, right by their runway. So it's not an unusual thing. So, but we'll make sure that we get all the approvals, whether it's FAA, Clearinghouse, or the Air Force. And it's very easy to do that. And I think because you and I aren't going to know all the details behind any of that airspace protection issues, that's why we have experts that we can go to, and it's very helpful. We'll get the answer, and then that way that your planning commission can make the right decision, because they can't be experts on it either. So we'll do that in the future.
Thank you.
So with that, that's kind of what I got, unless you got.
Anybody have any questions, commissioners? Mike, we appreciate you very much. Appreciate what you do for us, and and putting this in layman's terms so we can kind of understand it. So thank you.
And it's really made easy by your new wing commander. And as I always say, we always get the next great wing commander.
We do.
This is the
We
next
do,
one, right?
every time.
Anyway,
So-
thank you, Mayor.
You bet, thank you. Item 3.2, update on the Wood Ring Airport Joint Use Hangar. Keston?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you for your time this evening. So came before you just to give you a little update on the new joint use hangar that we are constructing out at the Wood Ring Airport. So just a little bit of background on it. It is essentially almost the exact same hangar that we have out there currently right now, the big 120-foot by 120-foot hangar that is just to the north of our terminal building. So this one, again, 120-foot by 120-foot. It is slightly shorter. This one's only 28 feet tall at the eaves. The other one, I think it just breaks 30. The door opening on this one will be 21 feet usable space, clearance space. The other one, the old joint use hangar, is 24 feet usable. Reason for the differences there, the old joint use hangar, when we built it about 10 years ago, of course, joint use for both the military and for the general aviation and community. And so the use case for that hangar was a ERJ-135, so a small commercial airplane. Thought being, if any time in the future that a commercial airliners could come into Enid, or in the unfortunate circumstances that one needed to make an emergency landing at Enid, we have a hangar that is big enough to house that aircraft. Since we already have one hangar out there that is big enough to house that aircraft, the thought was, well, we can save a little bit of money, make the other one a little bit shorter, still have the use case for the larger general aviation planes that come in, and of course the T-1, the T-38, and the T-6 military aircraft that use the Wood Ring Airport very commonly. And so the 21-foot opening door height takes care of all those aircraft no problem, and is a bit cheaper. So construction cost for this hangar is $1.6 million, a little bit above. It's funded by 3 different grants. The DSIP grant that Mr. Cooper just talked about a little bit. The one that we received last year will pay for a large portion of that hangar, and then we also have a P3 grant through the Oklahoma Department of Commerce and the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission's hangar program grant, as well as paying for a large portion of that hangar. We had our groundbreaking out there on the 28th of June, and so the projects are already underway, because of course the joint use hangar is only but one part of the 3-part DSIP projects that we're doing out at the airport. And so they are already down on the south ramp right now. They've got it torn out completely. They're almost completely done with putting in the stormwater pipe, and then they'll be shortly covering it back up and laying down brand new concrete, making that ramp look brand new again. So work on the joint use hangar. July 31st is when they're supposed to be working on it, or start working on it according to their calendar days working contract. I will say the rain has been really rough on the contractor. And so they probably will be a bit delayed on that July 31st if I had to guess. The problem wasn't so much the days actually raining that stopped them from working. It was they've got a big, I don't know if you've been down to the south ramp, but it's about I would guess 20-foot wide or deep ditch right now where they're replacing the stormwater pipe that runs underneath that ramp. So it'll rain and they'll start drying out, and then they have problems with groundwater soaking back into the trench. So they're constantly fighting keeping that trench dry so that they can actually do work in it. I would expect just a couple weeks delayed at most. They're supposed to give me an updated timeline on that this week, so hopefully I'll have a better answer. But I also wanted to bring a couple of renditions of what the hangar will look like. It's very similar to the current one. You can see here, these are just out of the plans and specs on the entire DSIP project. Front side is in the top left, and then the rear is on the bottom right, and then you'll have 2 side doors as well on either side. These exact same color almost as the current one. We will be adding logos for the city of Enid and for the Wood Ring Airport up above the door, which the current one does not have. And then also here is the inside dimensions of the hangar. The plane that you see in the middle there is called a Citation 10. It is the use case for this hangar for the height predominantly. So it is bigger than a T-1 Jayhawk, and so it has a wingspan of a little over 60 feet, and it has a height of just under 20. But I'm happy to answer any questions about the airport, the projects that we're doing out there, or any of the funding on any of them.
Did you talk about the crosswind?
Oh, yeah, crosswind runway. So we, if you've been out to the airport lately, you'll probably see, as you look out the windows in the restaurant, brand new concrete on our crosswind runway, so a secondary runway. Of course, our main one's the 8,000-foot runway that runs north and south. Secondary runway is a 3,150-foot runway that runs kind of northwest and southeast. Usable predominantly by general aviation aircraft, but it has been fully torn out. It used to be asphalt, and it was in pretty rough shape. If you'd ever been out on it, it was quite bumpy and had a problem with grass intrusions. And in fact, when we had a new air traffic controller out there probably a year and a half ago, she got quite a laugh out of it, because we actually physically in the summer would have to go out and mow our runway because the grass was so bad on it. So she didn't quite understand what we were asking for when we had a mower asking for access to the runway so that they could mow it, but it is no longer that case. It is brand new concrete and in great condition. It's had its soft opening already, so it is usable during daylight hours right now. It'll close again here next month probably. We have a contract in place to put brand new LED pilot controlled lighting on it with PAPIs, which are precision approach path indicators, basically tell you when you're flying into the runway, whether you're too high or too low or just right on glide slope. So that project will be coming up here in the next month. We'll close it back down again for probably about 30 days, and then it'll open back up and be fully open and ready to be used 24 hours a day.
Has been fuel sales?
Fuel sales have been wonderful out there. So we're pre-COVID, we were averaging right around 300,000 gallons of jet fuel a year, with about 30,000 gallons of avgas a year. During COVID, our numbers went surprisingly up. We were probably one of the 1 or 2% of airports in the nation that actually had an increase in fuel sales during COVID, and that was largely due to our relationship with Vance Air Force Base. They were able to use our airport as a place to stop for fuel, and so we got an increased amount of fuel sales during COVID shutdowns from selling fuel to the military on all varieties of aircraft. Since we've gotten on the kind of the aft end of COVID and things have gone back down to normal, we're actually still well and above what we were previously. Like I said, it was 300,000 gallons pre-COVID, about 150,000 gallons to the military, 150,000 gallons to general aviation aircraft. We've settled back around at 500,000 gallons of jet fuel a year now, 250 to the military, 250 to general aviation aircraft. So we've been able to come through COVID and actually end up in a better place through different quality changes that we've made to help increase the experience that customers have when they come into Enid, as well as doing marketing and in getting our name out there, getting our fuel price out there, and making sure people know that Enid's a great place to land, and it's a great place to get fuel.
Justin, I know a follow-on project is on the south ramp is the backside.
Absolutely.
You might talk about that a bit.
Yeah, so currently in the DSIP projects, so our south ramp is really a two-phase project. Phase one is the one that we're doing right now. We tore out, it's about a 70,000 square foot ramp, and then 8 what were called portable hangars that I think was back in the 70s were bolted into the concrete of the ramp during a big oil boom when we had planes literally parked out on the airport and we needed a place to put them. Was not fully thought out on where we put those hangars because drainage was an issue. So we tore those out. We're fixing the ramp to do that, and we're putting 8 48 by 40 hangars in their place. On the back row, there's this 45 series is what we called them. There's really 16 hangars, the 45 series, 16 porta-ports. The back row has another 8 that is currently untouched in the phase 1 project. Phase 2 will go in and remove those back porta-port hangars, which also suffer from a flooding issue, and we'll also get rid of some storage hangars. They're actually larger porta-port hangars that we have as well that are used strictly for storage. We charge an increased rate because they're non-aeronautical use. We're trying to get out of the market of having just storage out at the airport. We're an airport and we're there for planes and for people to buy fuel from us. So we're getting rid of those as well so that we don't have any problem with the FAA. And that'll allow, getting rid of those larger hangars and getting rid of the back row, the 45 series hangars will allow us to put new 48 by 40 hangars as well in their place. We'll also tear out some of the concrete in that back row to fix the drainage issue so they don't flood in the future. That's roughly on the, the back of the napkin, engineering math, right about a $2 million project. The front row of hangars is costing right about $1.5 million. I think it's just under about $8 under the $1.5 million mark. So the back row, these are the exact same hangars. They'll probably, depending on what prices do, cost right about $1.5 million. And we have about $500,000 worth of concrete work that we'll need to do to fix the drainage issues so that they don't flood when we put these brand new hangars in. So we have several different options that we're exploring for funding on that, predominantly maybe looking at P3 funding, but we're keeping our eyes open, looking for that funding source.
How many regional airports have crosswind runways?
Very few. Off the top of my head, so the way that the airports in Oklahoma are spread out, are categorized in regions, we're the only airport that I know of in northwestern Oklahoma that has a crosswind runway. You maybe out in Guyman, I don't think so. Stillwater, even though most people would say kind of northwestern Oklahoma, it actually falls in central Oklahoma, according to the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission's categories of airports region. So only one in northwestern Oklahoma, so it's a very important asset. It was a pricey project, about $3 million. It was 90% funded by the FAA. 5% by the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission, and 5% by this airport. But when those winds shift during the, like this time of year, when storms are moving through and the winds can shift, if you're a pilot up in the air and you get caught in that, you're really happy you've got that piece of pavement here in Enid. You've got Stillwater to the east is probably the closest crosswind runway, but then again, you're getting into commercial airports and not general aviation. Other than that, you probably have to go down to Wiley Post in Oklahoma City to get a crosswind airport or a crosswind runway in Oklahoma.
OAC's not funding crosswind runways anymore, right?
Even above that, the FAA is no longer funding crosswind runways anymore. So we were able to slip in right at the tail end. In fact, it was during our design portion of this project that the FAA came out with guidance saying that crosswind runways were no longer a priority for the FAA and that they would no longer be funding those projects, full stop. So unless there is a reprioritization of crosswind runways or for the FAA, you probably won't see another crosswind runway project funded in Oklahoma or nationwide. In fact, I was at a conference, an airports conference in Shangri-La last year, and we were talking about projects going on at different airports, and I brought up that we had just finished our crosswind runway portion, and Tulsa was surprised by that because they had just been turned down. A commercial airport had just been turned down for a crosswind runway project, saying that the funding was no longer available and that they would not fund that type of project.
The city doesn't subsidize our airport either, does it?
No,
It's in the black.
We are in the black. We're a profitable airport. We're an enterprise fund for the city of Enid. So we fund ourselves off of fuel sales, hangar rentals, and land leases. So very proud of that fact. It is very rare for a general aviation airport to be profitable. If you go to almost any other airport in the nation, you will see that the airports are subsidized by the city. I won't say that we never receive taxpayer funding. I think during the runway extension and probably even the terminal building project, we did get some taxpayer funding, but our day-to-day operations out there at the airport are taken care of by what we do out there.
I'd just like to say, Keston, we are blessed by you. I think you're the best airport director at a regional airport in Oklahoma.
I appreciate it.
I may be biased, but nobody can throw you a fastball here. You know what's going on, and you make it look easy. But what's important to know is it isn't easy. And so that's what I want to, when I ask you questions, I want this commission and the public to know this. People don't just fall all over themselves to come give us money. It takes your effort, Mike Cooper, some city staff, Steven, Scott. There's a concerted effort here, and so I've said it before, I'll say it again, we're not only in the golden era at Woodring, we're in the golden era for Enid, and you're a big reason, your leadership out there, thank you for what you do. We are lucky to have you.
Well, I appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. I'll try to keep up the work.
I sat there and watched you at this ERDA meeting, Whitney and Rob and Jer were there, and you talked for an hour and 5 minutes in so much detail that it made me very proud that we had you out there. Not everybody can do that. And
Well, I
I just
really
want you to know, well, I agree with you. You're a blessing. We're very fortunate to have you out there. So thank you for what you do.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate it. It's a great place to work, and I love my time in Enid, so I don't plan on going anywhere.
Don't ask for a raise.
Yeah, it's a good time to ask for a raise.
I was just saying to Scott, if Keston's doing such a great job, other airports see that, and they're probably going to offer him soon. So we have to be prepared to keep him here.
Colonel, I know you came in new and everything else and during construction on your runway. How's it been to have Enid's?
Very nice. Very, very nice to have this partnership and see how we're working together to make sure that it's mutually beneficial for both of us.
Cannot agree more. It's a great partnership.
Any other comments? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
I'll move on to 3.3, Call Lake Water Supply Program update. And Gerald, I think you're going to do that tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to do an update. It's really kind of a summary. I wanted to make sure that the commission understood that there are monthly staff meetings conducted by Garney and Garver, city staff, folks that are involved as inspectors. And we talk about a lot of issues. And I wanted to share some of those slides to make sure you saw those. I've asked Jason Jansen, who is the face of Garney, to come in here on August 15th and give you a thorough update. But I thought I would share the slides with you now and talk about some things that are important to us. And I'll start out by just reminding everybody, the Call Lake Water Supply Project is the most complicated, expensive project in city history. We probably started, depends on when you want to say we started, but we started probably in 2015 with a phase 1 study with Garver. And as you all know, our expected completion date is June 27th of next year, which is less than a year away now. And so it has been a difficult project. We've had some bumps in the road, but go ahead and give me the next slide if you would. Go ahead and give me the next one. That's just in the next one. A lot of these are pictures, so I hope that I try to get it out to you, so hopefully you have it on your iPad. These are pictures of the intake. I think several of you have been to the intake, maybe more than once, and we probably need to schedule another time for those of you that have not been. There's significant progress being made. There's a massive, I'm going to call it wet well, and that's probably an oversimplification. This is some pipe and intake that's going into the lake. And I want to say that picture on the right, I think you can see a crane. I think that's out so many feet into the lake, and that's where that stuff's going. But I just want to talk through this, talk about a few things important to us, and then try to answer your questions. But Jason Jansen will be here on August 15th. And I bet you he's watching tonight or will watch this. Go ahead and give me the next slide, please. Just more pictures. That's the marina. And if you can look at those, I think those are showing pictures of the intake and where they've got it and where they're getting ready to take it. Keep going. Next slide. Oh, there's I'm calling it a wet well. I don't know what the official engineering term is, but it's a massive, massive hole, and it actually used to be deeper. You can see the scaffolding at the bottom as they're putting concrete up along the walls. And then you can see the picture on the right of the crane. I believe the crane's still there with the work on the intake in the lake. Next slide. That's just some stuff that was in the slide. You can see what the contractor's looking at. This is showing the pipeline. This may be hard to see on the screen, but I know you can see it on your iPad. The important takeaway from this slide is that the pipeline itself is almost complete. There's several different versions. If you four graphs there, one of them's for delivery, one of them's for installation, one of them's for cleanup, and I can't read what the fourth one's for. But overall, the pipeline's about, I want to say 98% complete. And if you go to the next slide, I think there's a map. That map is a green line all the way to I-35. And the portion that's not complete is there's some smaller portions, and you can see better on your iPad screen where those gaps are, but it's nearly complete, and that's fantastic. One of the discussion points has been filling it up, particularly the western portion to I-35 with water to proof it and test it and do all the things that we need to have done to make sure it doesn't leak and that it's going to work. Next slide. You're just going to see more pictures of pipeline installation through, this is actually through North Enid. So what you see there is a patch where the pipe went through. And if you go to the next few slides, it's showing, you can see that blue pipeline marker, and you can see it's been raining a lot and the weeds have been growing, but if it wasn't for that pipeline marker, you probably wouldn't know that a pipeline had gone through there. So Garney's doing quality work. There's another look. Somewhere along the path, you can see a little bit of dirt, but the grass is taking over. Next slide. There you can see some of the markers and blow-offs and all the various appurtenances that are out along the route. It gives you a good idea of the quality of what's going on with the pipeline installation. Next slide. And just keep going. All right, there's a good look at what it looks like when they install the pipe in the ground. Just to remind everybody, that pipe's got to have at least 48 inches of cover. We have people out there working and verifying that. You can see they're doing it safely. These folks are professionals. You can see a massive backhoe in the background. You can see that trench shoring, cave-in protection stuff there. That's your pipeline going in the ground. That's going to serve 10.5 million gallons a day in about less than a year now to our new water treatment plant. So keep going. There you can see how they've done it. There it looks like they've terraced it a bit. You can see that big massive backhoe, a couple backhoes it looks like in the background. Keep going. Just more pictures of appurtenances in the field. I believe those are to allow air in. That's another look at where it's been buried. It looks very level to me. Garney's going to have a responsibility for a period of time after completion of the pipeline to address any issues that occur, like settling. But right there, it's looking pretty good. So if you ever get a chance, you can drive. A lot of the pipeline follows Phillips Road it's Phillips Road out in the county too. So you can just take a look at, that was the first part. They started from the west to the east. So those areas are looking pretty good in my opinion. Keep going. Just more pictures. You can see a little turn there and the picture on the left. Again, Jason can speak to you as the contractor who's building it. Some of the pipe required, I would call it slurry seal, but it's got some other kind of name. You can see that on the right where they need to secure the pipe. Keep going. There's a pipe joint, and it's got some kind of black coating on there that's required to make sure that it seals it up. If you keep going. Again, just more pictures of the construction. You can see it looks like a piece of equipment moving sticks of pipe into position. Next slide. Just keep going. Okay, and there's just what the contractors look at as far as talking about where they're at on bid packages. Keep going. And next slide. This is on the intermediate booster pump station. It's nearly complete. If you looked at that slide, you would get an idea of what's left. It's minor stuff that's left. There's more pictures of pipe. Go ahead, next slide. That pipe was at the water treatment plant. You can see this is where the walls of one of the buildings of the water treatment plant are coming up. You can see some of the pipe around it that's not backfilled yet. And so that's something that probably very soon we'll take a look at for anybody that wants to go. We'll set something up with Garney. For anybody, that one's pretty simple to go and look at. It's right here in town anytime you guys have some time. That's conduit for all the electricity. There's a lot of electricity that goes into treating water and securing our future for the next 100 years. Next slide. And that's just more pictures of the water treatment plant. You can just drive out there on Chestnut anytime you want, take a look. Again, another picture of building going up, looks like scaffolding. You can see the concrete pump in the background. Likely it's filling up the walls. Next slide. Just more, so you're getting an idea of, it sounds like the purpose of a water treatment plant is to treat the water that comes in, the surface water, mix it with some well water, and make sure it meets drinking water standards and distribute it. It sounds simple, but it's very complicated and very costly. as you know. Anyway, just more pictures. You can keep going. And there you can get an idea of what they're working on those slides. Keep going. This is Chestnut Water Main. I don't think we have any pictures on that because the clearing, I think, is getting ready to start on that, and Jason can speak to that more when he gets here. These program financials we'll take a look at. You can't really see that slide, but I think that's procurement schedule. I think the important stuff is on this slide, and I think the next slide. Go ahead, next slide. This talks about, you're well aware of this number. Recently, you did change order 6. That should be the last change order unless there is a scope change. And this is, as you remember, is $256.8 million to pay the contractor, the construction manager at risk to get this thing built. That does include the contingency amount that we've talked about before. None of that contingency has been used yet, and that contingency requires a discussion with the city and mutual agreement. So we'll keep you alerted on that. I think the next slide is just a follow-up. Oh, it's a pay application. Go back to that pay application slide. I don't know if that's on this meeting's claims list or the past one or something, but okay. Erin processes all these, and simultaneously she requests drawdowns normally. And do you want to talk about that process or talk about the money?
Absolutely. So as soon as the pay app comes in, it first comes to Garver and their team reviews it. Once they've signed off that everything is good with those pay apps, they come to our engineering department and the accounting department. We review them at the same time engineering does. And once engineering signed off and accounting is in agreement as well, we turn those in to Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality, and they also review them before the pay app is processed. We get that funding in, and then we pay GARNI at that time.
All right, next slide.
How long does that process take?
So they just turned in their June pay app to Garver on July the 3rd, and I think that it came through to us on Friday this last week, so the 14th, and so it will be on our next claims list, so August the 1st. And so typically we get our funding for that about a week after the meeting, or as long as a week up to after the meeting.
This really, the takeaway for me on this slide, this is a graph of cash flows that's changed over time. What I thought was on here, or one of the slides, but I didn't find it going through here, there you see the total cost of the project. I want to say we've paid about $180 million or something like that. Is that about right, Erin?
To GARNI, we paid $159 million.
Okay, so that gives you an idea financially. 159 divided by 256, I don't know, roughly 60% of the project or something like that paid for. So that kind of gives you an idea. I think is that the last slide or is there a few more? That is about cash flow. You can look at that on your iPads. Just a couple other things to talk about. You'll remember that we did a change order for Envirotech for the necessary inspection services. That should be the total amount of the new contract, and that is programmed to get us through June, is my understanding. And the next slide shows Garver, and as you know, you did a change order, a zero-cost change order for Garver to get us to January, but I think there's still going to be a significant amount of money. We'll find out after we pay all the bills, and then we'll have another conversation probably in December based on where we're at. Do you recall where we're at on that contract? 21 million, and we had something like 6 million or 7 million left, I think, as of May or something like that.
As of the end of June, we had 8.2 million open, but there is a claim tonight for 450,000 on the claims list.
And that'd be a monthly claim, right?
Correct, that would be their May invoice.
Okay. So that gives you an idea where we're at, and I think maybe that's the last slide. Yeah, questions? So really, it was just an opportunity to show you some slides that you may not see. Our next, I guess, internal meeting that's like that you're certainly welcome to come to is on August 22nd. And we'll have a council meeting on the 15th, and Garney will be here to update you. if there's any questions I can answer, I'll certainly try.
You know, Gerald, it's a good thing that we've been paying the bills, you know, as we go along with this project. So it's not, you know, a debt that's just out there that we have to catch up on. So with you all's guidance and expertise and the city staff, I just want to thank you all for a job well done in financing and management and, you know, things that people don't take notice of. And a lot of times they're unaware of it because they're not exposed to it. But, you know, under your leadership and Scott's, thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. I will say that, again, it's been a difficult project. Morali Kata is a rock star, in my opinion. I miss Morali, but he needed some time to go visit his family. So Morali, if you're watching or you watch this later, please come back in August. I'm expecting to see you in August. But yes, and Aaron's fantastic, a right-hand person for me. So again, I'll probably just leave it with, I don't ever want to lose sight. This is a phenomenal project. This project was approved by something like 68% of the people when they extended the sales tax. This project is legacy defining. This project secures the future, and you guys have directly been a part of it. And everybody that's been involved, this project will take us well into the future where when we are talking about industry, it doesn't matter whether they use water or not. We'd like them to. We're going to have water, right, Jason? So it's a fantastic project. I would recommend that when we're done, somebody should put in a PACE application for bus of each one of you to specifically place along the pipeline. So I can't remember who's on that. I don't know if that's you, Judd, now, but you can keep that in mind for the future.
We'll see.
Any questions that I can answer?
Thanks, Gerald. 3.4, we're going to review the fiscal year 2023 monitoring report for the CDBG program. Laura.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. This is just a quick report on a positive audit we had from HUD. It's usually, we're supposed to have one every 4 years, but because of COVID and changes in our offices, it was a little over 5. But we had no findings. And so that's the number one thing on there. Findings mean we were out of compliance in some way. We had one small concern we'll talk about in a minute. And better, I think we wound up on the positive side because we had 2 best practices that she found. And so we had more positives than negatives. On the concern, you have a copy of the our citizen participation book in your pads, and it's years old. I mean, we've had it as long as we've had CDBG. So, and it all came down to just wording. There were some places where it said we will give notice, we will have public hearings, but it didn't say we'll give 2 weeks notice, or it didn't say we'll give 30 days public comments. We were doing all the practices correctly. Our book just didn't spell it out exactly. And so she wanted us to fix that. The only one that was an issue that even got us to a concern level was we said that we may charge for CDBG materials if somebody come and asks for copies. And by CDBG law, we may never charge. And so even though we had never charged anyone and it only said we may charge, she wanted that out and she listed it as a concern. So again, very minor, it's already fixed, it's up to her for her approval. If she approves it, if you're fine with everything that's in that manual, we'll put the updated version out again for a 30-day comment period from the public, and as long as everybody's fine, we'll just have a revised citizen participation plan. On our best practices, our own Scott got us the first one. A lot of CDBG organizations in Oklahoma are like us. They're one person that runs them. Some towns are even smaller than us, have other duties besides this. And so when a person is out or we have changes in staff, it's easy to get behind and the practices and things to fall apart. And so because we had some change, Scott really stepped up when I started to, 1, help me learn the job, and 2, to learn what I was learning at the same time. And because we also had CARES money, CV2 money on top of my normal job, I was a little overwhelmed learning a new job and doing that. And he has stepped up and made Davis-Bacon job site visits. He has learned how to do a lot of what I do in case he needs to. And so HUD was very impressed with that
He's our
we have
Section
that
3
backup.
coordinator. Isn't he our Section 3 coordinator now?
He is my Section 3 coordinator. I
Congrats,
haven't been to a
Scott.
job site for that. He's done it all for me. And so that's very unusual, apparently, in other communities. We all get along and look after each other and do great teamwork here in Enid, but that got us a best practice because Scott was doing that. And so we're well prepared for any changes in program by having extra people who know what to do. The other one is our CDBG policy manual. It's a great big, several inch thick book. Apparently Sonia, our HR person, wrote it years ago. It's maybe 20 years old. Everything in it is still legal and accurate, and so that got us another best practice for having that manual. Dawn before me and myself in this position have found a few things that are not user-friendly with it, that maybe aren't quite up to date as far as how we practice. And so even though it's officially all legal, all right, Dawn started making changes to it, I've started making changes. And so again, that impressed our HUD person that not only do we have a book that's right, but we're still making it better so that it's better for the next people. And so that got us another best practice on our report. And the last part was just, we found some errors before she got here. And we fixed them. And so one had to do with payroll from CARES money and our regular entitlement money and who paid for that. We found it, we fixed it. Accounting went above and beyond. I took like 5 people in accounting to find it all and fix it all, and they did. And then another one was a simple one where the previous person had drawn some money from the wrong account, and it took us 10 months to get through HUD's vicious cycle of how to fix that, but we got it pulled from the right place, pulled from the wrong place, put in the right place, and had all that fixed before she got here. And so she gave us kudos on that she didn't come and catch the errors. We caught them, we fixed them. She was perfectly happy. So that is it. Like I said, it's a positive report, especially since we went long years and had 3 different people in my position during that time. And so if you don't have any questions, we just wanted to let you know we passed our audit, our monitor well.
Well, I'll say again, I think you're the best CDBG coordinator in any city. You've done a fantastic job. Again, some of this looks easy. It isn't easy. Those of you that deal with the federal government know that while they gave us the money, they have certainly lots of regulations. We learned a whole lot of new ones. Section 3, Davis-Bacon, applicable to CDBG projects. Of course, that has to do with capital projects, which we never got enough money to do before. And SAM registrations and everything else that we've learned.
Yeah, that one, they keep changing the rules. We've always used DUNS numbers or taxpayer identification numbers, and when Dawn was in this position, the government decided everybody has to have a SAM.gov number. So we've been trying to coach our subrecipients into getting SAM.gov numbers. So that's the ever-changing government rules.
Yes, it's been, but I think you've got it down. I know you communicate frequently. We know the folks by name that come and talk to us. Jackie McBride, you're in communication with a lot. Her supervisor, Earl Cook, wrote the letter, or I bet he didn't write it, he just signed it, and it's on the agenda. Hey, the mayor just reminded me, you also might mention that fair housing complaints, you handle those for the city, and you might just mention for people that are interested how you handle those.
Okay, absolutely. Many years ago, I believe, people could walk into our office and we actually followed up on fair housing complaints, maybe went and visited their place of where they rent from, the apartments or whatever. But it's changed a lot, so it's really, everything's on the computer. It's all digital. And so they do still call us. And so if someone in Enid is in an apartment and their heat's not working and they've made complaints and it doesn't get fixed, or someone changes their rent price astronomically, it's usually things like something's not fixed is most of the complaints. But if they feel like they're being discriminated against or not being properly taken care of, their apartment or house is not safe, then they call us. I ask them a few questions, and as long as it sounds like it's something that fair housing can help. If they don't have access to a computer, then I just pull up the form and I ask them the questions and I fill it out and I submit it on their behalf. But if they have access to a computer, I just refer them, and it's about a 5-page, short page, but 5-page kind of questions on a HUD site. And it's not that hard to do. I've never known anyone not to get called from fair housing within 48 hours. And so they respond pretty quickly.
I will say, though, that yesterday, I got a call from down in Texas. A lady's 92-year-old mother lives in Enid, lives in some Section 8 apartments, I believe,
Right.
and had a big issue with the way she's being treated and some water in the facility and just on and on and on, and was at her wit's end, didn't know where to turn. And I'll be honest, I didn't know either. And as it turned out, Gerald and I were about to have a meeting. He said, hey, talk to Laura. By the end of the day, you'd called the lady down in Texas, the daughter, talked to
yes.
her, and contacted HUD and told them so that they could come out and inspect that. So
Yeah.
that doesn't just happen.
It
So,
does not, but it actually is a very easy process, and like I said, it's almost all on the computer now, but we'll hold their hand through it, and I have told everyone, and I've probably in a year's time, maybe had about a dozen complaints, which is not bad for the size of our town and how many apartments and rental houses we have, so I think that's a reasonable amount, but I have told them all to call me back if they did not hear from HUD within 48 hours. I've never had anyone call me back saying they didn't get heard. I had somebody call me back and ask me an additional question, but nobody has called back. So the system works, and we are the starting point for the help if someone is having apartment issues.
Well, we appreciate you doing that.
Thank you.
All right.
I just want to say I really appreciate your organization and leadership, and you make my life easier. So thank you for what you do.
With that being said, I think that's all the items on our study session. We're going to adjourn, and we will pick back up with our regular meeting at 6:30.